Something strange is happening in Ukraine. For years, everyone thought Russia would eventually win through sheer size, manpower, and staying power. But that story is suddenly falling apart. Russian troops are being lost faster than they can be replaced. Oil sites are burning deep inside Russia, and the once feared Black Sea Fleet has been pushed far from the fight. So what changed? Because the answer is far more surprising than most people realize. Let's start with the part that's almost too crazy to believe, and it's all about land. Back in 2014, Russia grabbed roughly 7% of Ukraine, Crimea, plus a slice of the Donbas. Quiet, cheap, almost no resistance. Then, in 2022, the full invasion happened, and at its highest point that year, Russia controlled close to 27% of the entire country, before Ukrainian counterattacks pulled that back down to around 18% by that November. Now here's the number that should really stop you. From November 2022 all the way to early this year, 3.5 straight years of brutal, grinding war, Russia only managed to push that 18% up by about 1.5 more percentage points. To put that in terms anyone can picture, that's an area of land smaller than Los Angeles County. 3.5 years, well over 1 million casualties, for a piece of land smaller than a single county in Southern California. If you've ever wondered what attrition warfare actually costs in real terms, that's it, right there. And the casualty count keeps climbing. Western intelligence now estimates Russian dead alone sits somewhere around 500,000 men, and total Russian casualties, killed and wounded combined, have passed 1.2 million. That's roughly 3% of Russia's entire pre-war population of fighting-age men killed or hurt in a single war in the 21st century. In January 2026, this so-called 3-day special operation quietly passed its 1,418th day, which means it has now officially outlasted the entire Soviet Union's war against Nazi Germany. Let that sink in for a second. And here's the twist almost nobody guessed a year ago: the dying has only sped up. Since the start of 2026, Russia has been losing an average of around 35,000 soldiers a month killed or wounded, way up from roughly 23,000 a month throughout 2025. That jump from 23,000 to 35,000 a month is really the turning point this entire war is hanging on. Because for most of 2024 and 2025, Russia could still bring in more new soldiers than it was losing. The Kremlin threw huge money at the problem, like signing bonuses worth 4 to 8 times the average Russian salary, full debt forgiveness, free university, even free land. And honestly, it worked. Right up until the casualty rate jumped to 35,000 a month. In the first 3 months of 2026 alone, Russian recruitment fell 20% compared to the same period the year before. The Kremlin had been hoping for somewhere around 1,100 to 1,150 new contract soldiers signing up every single day. The real number has fallen to around 940. For the first time in this entire war, Russia is no longer replacing everyone it loses. And that single fact might end up being the most important sentence in this whole video. And look at who's actually signing those contracts now. Roughly 40% of new recruits are coming from what Ukrainian officials call vulnerable groups. Prisoners offered amnesty, men buried in debt, people pushed by employers or universities into volunteering. Russia is now reaching well outside its own borders too, recruiting from Central Asia, parts of Africa, and bringing in North Korean troops because the supply of people at home is genuinely running dry. Now, to be fair to Ukraine's side of this, Ukraine has paid an even steeper price in terms of its population. Its total casualties are smaller in raw numbers, somewhere around 600,000, but that's nearly 7% of Ukraine's entire pre-war fighting-age male population, more than double Russia's 3%. Ukraine has its own brutal manpower strain too. Tiredness, soldiers leaving without permission, recruitment shortfalls of its own. But here's the cold logic Russia was betting its entire plan on back in November 2022. Russia's much bigger population meant it could take bigger raw losses, while Ukraine in proportion would wear out faster and break first. That bet only works on one condition: that Russia can keep filling its own front line faster than it's emptying. And right now, for the first time since this war began, it genuinely can't. So that's the manpower problem. Now let's talk about the money problem, because this is where things get even more interesting. Officially, the Russian government says everything's fine. Unofficially, the cracks are everywhere you look. This year, Russia's own government cut its 2026 growth forecast from 1.3% down to just 0.4%, and the economy actually shrank in the first 3 months. Oil is the engine that pays for this entire war, and that engine is struggling badly. In January and February alone, Russia's oil and gas income fell almost 50% year over year. Hit hard by sanctions on two of its biggest oil producers and a stronger ruble that's quietly eating away at export income from the inside. And Ukraine isn't sitting back waiting for sanctions to finish this job for them. Ukrainian long-range drones have been tearing directly into Russian oil sites, refineries, export terminals, fuel depots hit deep inside Russia itself. In June 2026, Ukraine launched one of the biggest drone attacks on Moscow since the war began, hitting the capital's main oil refinery twice in a single week. Thick black smoke poured over a city just 9 miles from the Kremlin. Russia claimed it shot down more than 500 drones that night. A meaningful number still got through. Ukraine has actually given this plan a name: kinetic sanctions. Forget the slow grind of Western sanctions policy. Just go burn the refineries yourselves. And it's working. Russian oil refining output has dropped to its lowest level since 2009. And here's the kicker: this is happening at the exact moment global oil prices spiked because of the conflict with Iran. Russia should be cashing in right now. Instead, it's watching its own fuel sites go up in flames on live drone footage. Inflation tells the exact same quiet story of decay under the surface. Officially, Russia claims 5.2%. Foreign intelligence reports put the real number at roughly 3 times higher than that. The central bank has held interest rates in the double digits for years now, which is basically a silent way of admitting that things are far worse beneath the official numbers than the headlines let on. And regular Russians are starting to feel every bit of it. Even Russia's own state-run polling shows Putin's approval sliding from nearly 78% before the invasion down to around 65% today. Those are the Kremlin's own numbers, reported by their own pollsters. The real picture out there is almost certainly worse than that. Now here's where this gets really interesting, because back in March of 2025, Zelensky said something that, at the time, sounded almost like wishful thinking. He said, "The war was brought from Russia, and it is to Russia that the war must be pushed back. They must be the ones forced into peace." At the time, that sounded like a nice line for a speech. A year later, it's basically become Ukraine's entire military plan, and it's working better than almost anyone expected. Because Ukraine has quietly moved away from the old, very costly plan of throwing soldiers into expensive ground counterattacks, and instead built an entirely different kind of war. One fought with cheap drones at every single range you can imagine. And this is honestly where the most important part of this whole story lives: the drones. And specifically, the kill zone they've created along the entire front line. Stretch a wall of cheap, swarming FPV drones across all 745 miles of that front, 15 to 30 kilometers deep on both sides. And you get something that's never really existed in war before. A strip of land where nothing moves without being seen, and almost nothing that's seen survives very long. Drones now cause roughly 70% of all deaths and injuries on both sides of this war. Big tank breakthroughs, the kind of warfare that defined the entire 20th century, are basically impossible now. Too many eyes in the sky, too many bombs waiting, a kill zone too packed for either side to break through cleanly. It's also made this war crueler in ways that rarely make headlines. Getting wounded soldiers out under constant drone watch is nearly impossible now, which means wounded soldiers are often left out there for hours, sometimes days, before anyone can reach them. The ratio of wounded to killed has actually collapsed from roughly 10 to 1 early in the war down to just 3 or 4 to 1 today, which tells you plainly that more of the wounded are simply dying out there before help ever arrives. But the real smart move here is range, because Ukraine isn't just defending its trench line anymore, it's reaching directly into Russia's supply chain. Mid-range drones with ranges up to 300 kilometers are tearing into the roads, fuel convoys, and ammunition depots that keep Russia's entire front line fed. Take the M14 highway, Russia's key supply road running from Rostov through occupied Mariupol all the way into Crimea. Open source analysts have counted more than 125 drone strikes along this single road in just the past couple of months, destroying dozens of trucks loaded with fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements before they ever reach the front. And then there's the sea, which might be the single most one-sided part of this entire war. Russia entered this conflict with an actual navy. Ukraine entered with almost nothing. Using cheap sea drones and missiles, Ukraine has sunk or damaged roughly 15 of Russia's 36 pre-war Black Sea warships, including its flagship cruiser, the Moskva, and forced the rest of that fleet to pull back hundreds of kilometers away from Crimea, hiding out at Novorossiysk instead. Russia's navy now operates in only about a quarter of the Black Sea. Ukraine, with basically no navy of its own, controls the pace of action across more than 60% of it. Sit with that for a second. A country with almost no fleet has basically shut down one of the largest navies on the entire planet. And Ukraine's longest range strikes now reach more than 1,750 kilometers into Russian territory, 2.5 times farther than at the start of the war. Moscow, St. Petersburg, the Caucasus, almost nowhere across Western Russia is fully safe anymore. Russia has tried to fight back against all of this, and not just on the battlefield. In February 2026, SpaceX cut off Russian access to Starlink devices that Russian forces had smuggled into occupied Ukrainian territory to coordinate drone operations and battlefield communication. That forced Russian units back onto older, more visible antenna systems, the exact kind of signal that Ukrainian counter-drone units can spot and destroy far more easily. And separately, since the spring of 2025, Russia has been steadily shutting down Telegram inside its own borders, the messaging app most of the former Soviet world actually relies on. Officially, the Kremlin says this is about stopping Ukrainian drones from accessing local networks. Unofficially, it's also conveniently shut down how Russian protest groups organize, and it's frustrated Russia's own soldiers and officers, who relied on Telegram for battlefield coordination just as much as anyone else. And then, in a twist nobody saw coming, Ukraine actually caught a major political break in Europe. For months, Hungary's longtime leader Viktor Orban had been blocking a €90 billion EU loan package meant for Ukraine, using his veto as leverage in an unrelated pipeline dispute. Then in April 2026, Orban lost his re-election bid in a landslide to challenger Péter Magyar, ending 16 years in power. Under pressure, Orban lifted the veto before leaving office, and that €90 billion lifeline to Ukraine is now flowing. One European election, one veto lifted, and Ukraine just bought itself years of runway. So now, add it all up. 3 pillars: men, money, and machines, all cracking at the exact same time. and that leaves Putin staring down two truly terrible options. Putin has publicly ordered his military to finish taking over the entire Donbas region by the end of this year. Based on the current pace of advance, that target isn't just ambitious, it's close to fantasy. Even at last year's faster pace, full control would have taken another 2 to 3 more years. At this year's stalled out pace, it's further away than it's ever been. Option 1. Agree to some kind of ceasefire roughly along the current front line, and quietly give up the dream of taking the entire Donbas. That risks real anger from hardliners who were promised total victory years ago. And Ukraine, gaining real momentum for the first time in years, now has far less reason to accept a deal that simply freezes the map in Russia's favor. Option 2. Order another general mobilization, forcing another 200,000 men or more into service. The last time Russia tried that, back in September 2022, over 1 million Russian men of fighting age fled the country rather than fight. It was a political disaster the Kremlin has spent 3 years trying very hard to avoid repeating. Now picture trying that again, with approval ratings already sliding, an economy already under strain, and an army that's currently losing ground instead of gaining it. Neither option looks anything like winning. One looks like quietly admitting defeat. The other looks like betting absolutely everything on a hand Russia may not be able to play twice. 2026 was supposed to be the year Russia finally finished what it started back in 2022. Instead, it's turning out to be the year the math finally turned against the Kremlin for good. 4 years of grinding, brutal war, and the side that was supposed to win simply by outlasting the other is now the one running out of time. Whether this ends in a negotiated ceasefire or another desperate, forced mobilization, one thing has genuinely changed for good. The old idea that Russia could just wait this war out is gone. And if that idea is dead, the next chapter of this war could look very different from everything we've seen so far. Stay tuned.